I hope that each of you found this to be a valuable opportunity. I learned that Barbara Spectre was probably my swim teacher in Camp Ramah in 1966, so you never know. We're all here because we're invested in our future as a Jewish people. As Jacob said at the outset, we know that whatever bound us together for centuries, namely external threats, no longer holds us together. The good news, and we know it's good news, is that we're living in a borderless, porous, fluid world where Jewish identity, Jewish affiliation, Jewish commitment, normative definitions of Judaism are up for grabs. We know a lot more than we did 10 years ago about Jewish peoplehood. We know that stronger Jewish identity helps but does not guarantee Jewish peoplehood. We know that strong Jewish identity leads to a sense of belonging to, identifying with, feeling connected to the Jewish people, but does not necessarily lead to feeling a responsibility for the Jewish people. We know that a Jew with a strong sense of Jewish peoplehood situates himself or herself historically and geographically through time and through space, and recognizes the significance of global Jewish responsibility. Changes in technology, globalization may challenge some of our traditional notions of community, but they are assets to mine, opportunities to embrace, and new paradigms that we must heed as professionals. Many have written about the attenuation of diaspora and specifically North American Jews' connection to Israel. But we know that stronger Jewish identity and finding a home in Jewish community generally leads to stronger sense of identifying with and connecting to Israel and the Jewish people. This is also an issue for Israelis. Israeli education has neglected any cultivation of identity of a Jew and a sense of Jewish collective for decades. We are all here because we know that we need to ask more Jews to ask themselves, what does being Jewish mean, but also, what is my connection to Jews across the globe? Jews I may never meet. What is my responsibility for Jews with whom I may disagree, or who question my way of being Jewish? How do I make my Jewish values that I hold dear come to life in my actions? We hope this session will explore some of these important questions. As professional leaders and as of the Jewish community, we need to understand what are the essential building blocks for Jewish peoplehood. What are the educational reforms required? What are new mitzvot of Jewish peoplehood that perhaps need to be incorporated into our practice? What policy changes are needed? And what can we learn from different models that we'll hear about today from two fantastic experts in the field? I'm delighted to introduce Jonathan Ariel and Barbara Lerner-Spectre. Jonathan, I call him Johnny. He's Yonatan, but I still call him Johnny. Johnny is Executive Director of MAKOM, which develops cutting-edge content and provides professional training for educators, rabbis, arts programmers, activists, leaders about Israel and Jewish peoplehood. MAKOM is an initiative of the Jewish Agency for Israel. Johnny has been working in experiential adult education for the last 30 years. Much of this has revolved around how Jewish civilization can surface questions of values through ethical experiences that signpost commitment to action. He lectures and writes in his fields of interest, contemporary Jewry and experiential education, and he's published numerous articles, books, and edited collections. He's at work on how to nurture personal implications of the Jewish collective potential. Before I ask him to come forward, I'm going to introduce Barbara Lerner-Spectre, who will follow him. Barbara Lerner-Spectre is founding director of Paideia, the European Institute of Jewish Studies in Sweden, a non-denominational academic institute that is one of the prime forces in regenerating European Jewish life and culture. She was formerly on the faculty of the Hartman Institute of Advanced Jewish Studies in Jerusalem, where she taught Jewish thought, and was one of the founders of the Seminary of Judaic Studies in Jerusalem. Her area of research is in models of inference in Christian and Jewish post-Holocaust theology, for which she received a research grant from the Yad Vashem Institute. Barbara's publications include A Theology of Doubt, and together with Noam Tzion of the Hartman Institute, the two-volume A Different Light, a Hanukkah book of celebration. In 2007, she received the Max M. Fisher Prize for Jewish Education in the Diaspora. Both Johnny and Barbara are thought partners and colleagues of mine. I speak personally, and you're all in for a treat. What we're going to do this afternoon is ask each of them to focus on this issue of both Jewish peoplehood into practice and forces of Jewish identity and developments in Jewish identity from their experiences that lead to Jewish peoplehood. We will then have time and facilitated discussions at the tables, and then we will have time for public Q&A. Thank you very much, and I invite Johnny forward.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Jerusalem, those of you that are not from here. So I'm going to try and give, in the time available to me, 4 observations, 3 gateways, 2 programmatic suggestions, and 1 exhortation. And we'll see if we manage to get there in that time. So the 4 observations. The first is this very tricky, slippery idea of identity as to whether it's about the personal or the collective. And of course it's about both, and some profound interconnection between them, and that none of us as individuals ever manage to become who we are without reference to a social group, without reference to being able to say, well, actually, I do agree with him or her, or I'm not very much like him or her. And therefore it's that social process caught between the me and the we. If we're interested in Jewish peoplehood, we have to attend to both of those and enable both to flourish in a smart way. There's a bunch of psychologists immediately after the Second World War, and forgive the gender nature of the insight that they gave, but I'll give it in its original. It was of those times. All men are like no other men. All men are like some other men. All men are like all other men. All men are like no other men. Yes, we actually are all individuals. If you remember your Monty Python scene, yeah, we're all individuals. Yes, each of us has an individual fingerprint. We each have our own DNA. There truly is no one else like us on the face of the planet. At the other end, all of us are like all other human beings. Compared to tables, or compared to pears, or compared to tractors, yes, human beings are all very much alike. But there is an intermediate category, say these psychologists. All humans are like some other humans. We are part of groups. There's no way of being just part of the big group without going via the intermediary group. And those intermediary groups might be about basketball players, cheesecake eaters, English speakers, Jews. And the issue of Jewish people that comes to the fore is how do we increase the numbers of people who say, yes, that being part of that Jewish group is one of the ways in which I mediate between who I am as an individual and who I am as a human being. Second observation, the tension between now and forever. We happen to live in a world that's a fairly instant world, where things must happen now. And I'm one of those people. If the internet connection doesn't quite work as fast as it should, then there's frustration on the way. But all of us know, I believe, deep down, that things that only come immediately can also go immediately. And that we need some sense of forever, for netzach. It strikes me that many of the things that are going on in the Jewish world at the moment are losing that sense of for netzach, forever. And we have to try and ensure that we have the right balance again between now and forever. Third observation. It often feels as though we need wow experiences. I don't know how many of you have been to the Birthright mega event. If you haven't, you should do so as part of your anthropological understanding of who the Jews are. Right? But the internal, inherent logic of a Birthright mega event, and I love it, but the internal, inherent logic of it is that next year, or the next time you get those young people together, you can't only give them a wow experience, you have to give them a wow experience to the power of 2. And then the year after, wow to the power of 3. And that will inevitably disrupt our ability to have some kind of a vibrant Jewish communal life. Instead, we have to bounce the wow with a sense of aha. In many ways, it's the distinction between emotions, the wow, and cognitive emotions, the aha. Archimedes, when he jumped out of his bath shouting, "Eureka, Eureka," he was clearly emotional. But he was emotional because the penny had dropped and he had an aha moment. Another way of capturing that one is what we see happening today in the big wide world, the celebrity culture. It's all about the moment. It's about how we feel now, right? Juxtaposed with a sense of heroes. If you ask young people today who are their heroes, you very often get the answer, a list of celebrities. The notion of heroes has jumped to a different category in the way that I understand it. It's balancing up Kim Kardashian on the one hand, juxtaposed with those of us in our profession who care for people who've got cancer. Those of us in our profession that care for people in disparate parts of the world. What is the notion of a hero juxtaposed with celebrity? And the fourth observation is the necessity to balance comfort with challenge. I'm a big fan of comfortable shoes. It's really horrible walking around without comfortable shoes. But we need challenges. Not everything can be comfortable. People should sweat a bit if we're really going to be able to make most of Jewish potential for the next generation. Those are the 4 observations. Now the 3 gateways. The first one says, the covenantal gateway. You want to come into the Jewish people via the covenantal gateway? By all means do. Please, it's a fabulous gateway. As we often say, we didn't just meet here or at the last Quadrennial. We all first met at Mount Sinai, or we all first met coming out of Egypt. That's what our tradition intimates to us. What's fascinating about that, of course, is the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel's first line says, "In the land of Israel, Kama Ama Yehudi." In the land of Israel, the Jewish people, in the English translation, was born. Of course, it's not true. The Jewish people was born in Egypt. The first reference to us as a people was when there was a new Pharaoh. And what does that give us as possibility? And then the next big experience at Mount Sinai, what does that give us? If those things took place out of Israel, then it gives us the opportunity also to say, hold on a second. The balance between Israel and non-Israel can be recast and rethought through after these 60-odd years of phenomenal effort to make sure that we do have an Israel in the way that we do. The covenantal challenge then is, how do we keep a tradition in good order? Alistair McIntyre's phrase, the philosopher. What does it mean to keep a tradition in good order? It's not that you just keep doing in the next generation what you did in previous generations. It's not static. But to keep something in good order means that you learn together what are the rules by which that tradition develops, the ways in which it can develop. In many ways, one of the most fabulous things on offer to us as a Jewish Peoplehood project is Daf Yomi. the study of Talmud that takes place all the way around the world. What is the non-orthodox equivalent, or could be the non-orthodox equivalent, of Daf Yomi, the study of Talmud? And of course, the Talmud is readily available now in English and more in Russian, more in French, through the marvelous Steinsaltz edition. How do we develop the appropriate life cycle rituals that speak to that? The second gateway, beyond the covenantal, which again you can come into only through this gateway before you have to encounter the others, I would call the communitarian gateway. This is the gateway that says, actually, it's the Jewish people who've outperformed themselves as a group in the last couple of generations, achieved remarkable things in terms of Holocaust memorial, in terms of establishing Israel and all that goes with it. How do we hold on to Israel wisely so that we don't lose this third commonwealth in the way that we lost the first and the second? I would suggest to you that one of the tasks is to draw your cognitive map of which Jews you have contact with. Who are you in conversation with? With whom do you have relationships? How can we be unified but not necessarily uniform? The network of relationships and organizations we have might have to be updated. Some organizations, as we know, are going to go to the wall in this economic recession. Some call it an economic depression. It's going to lead to something else, very different perhaps from what we have now. Chaim Weizmann, at the end of his life, when he had a really bad chesty cough, his doctor said to him, "Spit, spit, clear your lungs, spit, spit." And Weizmann's response was, "There's no one left worth spitting at." I think one of the markers of our vitality is when we know there are people worth spitting at, even as we recognize that the reason they're worth spitting at is because we're in some kind of relationship with them. The third gateway, the cosmopolitan gateway. This is the one that says, actually, the way in which we Jews as a people, as a collective, can be coherent is when we come together to the world, to meet the world, and bring something of significance to it. Not to retreat from the world, but dafka to go and engage with it. There was an old classic song that we used to sing in Zionist youth movements. Maybe they still do, I don't know. Anu banu outsa livnotu le'banot ba. We came to Israel to build and to be built. I want to say that the Jewish people today has to go out to the world, all the way around the world, wherever there is need, and say, Anu banu letaken v'lehitaken. We've come to repair, but in our own sense to be repaired. It will force us to come with humility, and not that we have all the answers. And it will add a necessary corrective to the way that Judaism has developed. So these three gateways, you have to touch on all of them. The covenantal, the communitarian, the cosmopolitan, if we want the Jewish people to flourish. Two ideas. First, transformational experiences. We are the absolute genii at constructing transformational experiences, according to all the theories of what transformational learning is about. It's based on three key ideas for us at this time. Who are you? Who am I? We don't have sufficient pedagogies to explore how do we actually put our deepest cultural assumptions on the table, one with the other. The second piece of it is, what do I care about? What do you care about? Not what interests you, but what do you deeply, deeply care about? And how do we get that onto the table? Do we have the ways of asking it in such a way amongst the diverse Jewish people so that we can? And the third would be, what do we do together about that which we all care about, or that which we both care about? I think one of the possibilities here is literacy. We Jews speak more than 100 languages as first tongues. There are pockets of illiteracy out there in the world. Given that literacy is so significant to us as a people, in our tradition and our heritage, how can we take that skill, look at ourselves, litaken, and figure out our own Jewish literacy, and at the same time go out into the world and spread literacy to those that would so be interested? And the second programmatic suggestion is, many of you know of B'Magalei Tzedek or Urida Tzedek that have created a tav chevrati, a social seal, a kashrut a seal, but for the way workers are treated and the way food is produced and all the rest of it. So come on, as a profession, let's take that and racket it up. What does it mean for a federation to be worthy of a Tav Chevrati? What does it mean for a JCC, a synagogue, a Jewish care organization, Lifeline for the Ages, whatever it might be? How can we have a Jewish community and a Jewish world that every institution is figuring out for itself? What does it mean that we might be worthy of receiving a moral Tudat Kashrut? That we, the Jewish people, become the embodiment of a group that has a moral conversation at its heart. And of course, one of the possibilities here is that once we've got going on this, we don't limit it only to the Jews. We, through our cosmopolitan interest, start taking it out and about to other faith groups, other cultural groups, and we start transforming the world from the bottom up. Which leads me to my last point, the exhortation. I think the last era of Jewish history has been about amassing power. I'm not alone in this. I'm not the first to say it, but I deeply believe it. I think we've done a remarkable job of amassing power. Clearly in the state of Israel, where you have the army that you have, with the intelligence services that you have, despite the long catalogue of mistakes and errors that they make. We have economic powers. But you look at Jewish communities around the world today, we have more wealth in our communities and in our family foundations than Jews could ever have dreamed of. We have more Jews today studying Tanakh and Talmud than we've ever had in Jewish history. We've got more Jewish studies flourishing all over the place. We have political power, soft, hard, lobbies, AIPACs, whatever. We have more power. The big question, the exhortation is, okay, what is the smartest use of that power that we have amassed for the next generation? What do we want to do with it? And in order to get there, I want to suggest that the only way is to try and bring those three gateways of the covenantal, the communitarian, and the cosmopolitan together. And then, if a Brit is entitled to say this, to launch a conversation of the Jewish people, by the Jewish people, for the Jewish people, as to what the Jewish people, as a people, should do next. It's a really deceptively easy question to ask, and tough to answer. But if we, the people, take on to come up with smart answers to how we best want to use our power, I think we, the Jewish people, will be repaired and improved and bettered for it. Thank you.
In the spirit of Jewish peoplehood, I want to pass along to you an opening that I often heard from Rabbi Dick Hirsch, the head of the Reform Movement for many years here in Israel, and or the worldwide Reform Movement. And he used to open up his speeches, and you're welcome to use this. This is shared experience of the Jewish people. He used to open up by saying, "I feel like an Egyptian mummy, pressed for time." Pressed for time to talk about Jewish identity and essentially to make a diagnostic of why we have such a problem with this, and then by extrapolation what I think is wrong with the notion of Jewish peoplehood, the things we have to be careful about. My son told me, "What, you're giving a presentation without a PowerPoint?" But he didn't tell me what I have to do to get it started. Hold on.
You got it.
Oh, got it. Yeah, but, oh, there it is. It's up here. Okay. You know, we get a lot of things wrong. One of the things we get wrong is when someone asks us what religion we are, and we answer Jewish. And we also get it wrong when someone asks us what nationality we are, and we say, I'm Israeli. And we also get it wrong when someone asks us, what people do you belong to? And we say, the Jewish people. They're all wrong. They're all wrong because it's a category mistake. The question is wrong. The question is wrong because of something that Buber noted in his famous essay on Zion. He said, you know, in Genesis 12, when God spoke to Abraham for the first time, what did he say? He said, go to a certain land, you will be my people and I will be your God. What an unusual configuration. There never was a religion, the God, before there was a people. There never was a people before there was a designation for a certain land. There's a certain swirl, a choreography here of three elements that make us so unusual that we're not a religion and we're not a people and we're not a nationality. We're an unusual combination of all three that we don't even have a name for. Mordechai Kaplan tries to use the word civilization. Maybe that comes close, but people don't ask, what civilization are you a part of? But it points to a problem and also an exquisite system. Because it's not a casual relationship between a religion, a nationality, and a peoplehood. Each one serves, as it were, as a corrective for the other. A Torah, a system of law that is consistently mediated by the will of the people, by the oral Torah. What does that mean? It's an antidote, theoretically, for fundamentalism. Always the interpretation, the ongoing thought of the people, how they understand the law, becomes just as important as the law itself. The Torah itself, however, mediates as well that notion of people. It's not just a people. It's not just an ethnic group. It's not just a mob. It's a group of people that are elevated by certain principles. Look at how the correctives work. The land of Israel. How does it mediate the notion of religion? Because it mediates against this becoming only a spiritual entity. Jewish law had to become concrete because it was in relationship with the land. Similarly, the notion of a religion transforming the most mundane of all things, earth, somehow elevating it, somehow incorporating the transcendent into the immanent. The people of Israel, how were they to be transformed by the land of Israel? Oh, Chaim Nachman Bialik captured it so well in his City of Slaughter. Because we without a land, what did we become? What we became.